All right, everybody, we're back on Skywatchers Radio on PSN Radio and, of course, Dark Matter Radio Network. We have our guest, Ted Peters, on, the author of the book UFOs, God's Chariots, Spirituality, Ancient Aliens, and Religion, Yearning in the Age of Extra-terrestrials. Ted, welcome to Skywatchers Radio, my friend. How are you doing tonight?
It's good to be with you, watching the sky, watching for dark matter. That's exciting.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Coincidental? So how do you skywatch for dark matter? What kind of
if you're looking for dark
you're
matter and a flying saucer appears right in front of it, then you've got real excitement, don't you?
I can't wait to see that without using Photoshop.
Good point. Yeah.
Do I hear a note of skepticism?
And I'm not a skeptic. I do believe, but when something doesn't sound right to me, I'm going to call Bat Squatch. I'm going to say, please explain that or break it down for me because something doesn't sound right with it.
It sounds like you like evidence, right?
There are some things I'll take on faith, some things I'll take on evidence.
A religious man he is not, by the way, Ted.
Well, yes, I am. Sure I am.
It's possible to be religious and also like evidence. I think that they can kind of go together.
I agree. Now,
religion and spirituality are also two totally different things. And are we talking about organized religion when it comes to these topics as well?
When I deal with the UFO phenomenon, I'm really dealing with spiritual sensibilities, not necessarily organized religion. And I do think that certain sensibilities that simply belong to the human race and have been there in our culture for millennia actually come to expression in our own day, even in the secular culture. So you don't need to have an organized religion in order to think religiously or spiritually.
Yeah, but the way the world is right now, seriously, the way the world is right now, eons of spirituality is not translating to how people are dealing with the world around them.
Well, I fear that unfortunately it is translating, but it's coming out in disguised form. So Vladimir Putin wants to conquer foreign countries. Why? Well, he wants to defend high moral standards in the Orthodox Church of Russia. So it's a very disguised form, but it's alive and well, and I think it's alive and well in the UFO phenomenon as well, but it's simply disguised, camouflaged. The names have changed, but classic ancient religious desires for salvation, perfection, eternity, all of these things come to expression in the UFO phenomenon, just as it does in many other departments of secular life.
All right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, let's go back here, with UFOs and spirituality and religion. How far back do you date the first recollection of something that can be considered UFO-based in historical records when it comes to religion? Like, what's the furthest record that I guess you researched that you can say, this could be UFOs, what they're talking about here?
Well, I like to deal with the UFO phenomenon as a package, and it's a big package. As a package, and I just start with June of 1947 and work down to the present time. Oh, yes, one can go back and retrieve earlier accounts of things and then try to sweep it in. But there's been a consistent pattern since 1947 that really belongs to our post-World War II culture. Themes such as why science is more important than politics, or why is it that we human beings on Earth cannot settle our political problems, and why we can't have peace on Earth. And these are, I call them religious or spiritual themes that press their way all the way through the phenomenon. And so I don't just ask the question, are they real? Or are they just kooks, nuts, and wackos that see UFOs? But I want to see, what does this represent in our culture, and why does the mystery of flying saucers take the form that it does? So those who do ancient astronaut theories are actually very modern people who go back to ancient documents and ancient archaeology and reinterpret everything. So there's really nothing there in the ancient world. It's really a projection of very modern people with technological minds who go back to the ancient world and just change everything in light of their way of looking at things.
Ted, that's the perfect answer that I was looking for, my friend. Let me tell you, because that's exactly what happens. And look, shows like Ancient Aliens they're entertaining, but it's not very factual when you actually do your homework on some of the stuff they're talking about. Like,
well, why do you think they always say at the end or when they're posing a question, could it be, maybe, possibly, aliens? There's no definitive proof there.
There is none. None at all.
But then again, there are things that are so totally unexplained without there being some type of an outside intervention. I mean,
some of the evidence that they raise, by they we mean the so-called ancient astronaut theorists that appear on the History 2 channel, and like you guys, I watch those shows too. They're really quite exciting and quite imaginative. But they'll ask, could it be aliens, about things that we already have a great deal of explanatory evidence for. We do not need aliens, for example, to explain how the pyramids of Egypt were built. We know how they were built because everything.
They told us. Egyptians told us.
That's right.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. What's your decision making on how the pyramids were built?
Well,
their schematics and stuff that they left behind. I mean, they left.
In some cases, the architect and the contractor and their names are all listed there, and so also the methods for their construction. And if you take a look at the history of Egyptian pyramidology for a 1,000-year period, you'll see the first ones were kind of small and kind of clunky, actually, and over the centuries they learned how to do a better job. So by the time you get to the second millennium BC, they're quite masterful pieces of human achievement, to be sure, but it was a gradual step-by-step growth, and it doesn't take interstellar intervention to explain the construction of the pyramids, as marvelous as they are.
Hang on one second. What about the people that actually state that they have carbon dating and other evidence to prove that the pyramids were built much further back into history than second millennia BC?
Yeah, but that still doesn't mean it's aliens, Alan. I mean, just because it was built maybe a lot, further back, it doesn't mean that aliens came down and did it.
No. What I'm saying is that if you're having blueprints with the architect's name on it that are from second millennia, are those the people that were just refurbishing it or doing some extra work on it, which is why they had the blueprints and it was built even further back? Still haven't been able to explain how did they lift all that stonework all the way that high.
Well, there's actually explanations, but I'm sure Ted has a better answer for you than I do. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, they just... By the way, in the ancient world prior to the era of machines, they used animals and human beings for labor. You and I are so used to just pushing buttons and having machines do our work over the last couple centuries that we forget the role that slavery played.
Hold on. I might not be a religious person, but I'm Jewish. Don't talk. I know about the slavery thing because I got the whole Passover holiday every single year where we review it.
Well, your ancestors actually made bricks.
What do you mean it's our fault?
For the Egyptians out of sand and straw. And that's part of the Passover too, isn't it?
Actually, it doesn't say anywhere that we built the pyramids, but we did build, and we were slaves, and we did do things in Egypt. But in all honesty, funny as it is, there's really nowhere in the Bible where it says we did the pyramids.
No, most pyramids were constructed before the Hebrews became slaves in Egypt. Pharaoh Menes begins the whole process about 3000 before the Common Era, and most of the big pyramids are constructed by 1800 or so BC, when the Hebrews are enslaved. Oh yes, there were some pyramids built later, but no, we're not going to credit the Hebrews for doing that. The Egyptians built lots of things. Pyramids are only some of the things that they built. But I think one of the problems that I have with the ancient astronaut theorists is that they're not educated when it comes to garden variety anthropology or even theories of religion and how religious symbology works. One of the common themes amongst ancient human beings, which is still very much alive today, is the connection between heaven and earth. And we have that with shamans who fly to heaven and get secrets and come back. And so also placing retreats on mountaintops. And if you live in an area where there are no mountaintops, what do? Well, you build them. So on the plain of Shinar and the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for example, the ancient Babylonians and Assyrians, they built their mountains just as the Egyptians built their pyramids. And when you go to Central America, what do you get? More pyramids. And in the case of the Olmecs and the Mayans and the Toltecs, the top of the pyramid is where heaven and earth meet, and that's where religious rituals took place. It's not an issue of technology. It's an issue of how a culture holds itself together around religious meaning. And ancient astronaut theorists sort of fail to see this common human denominator as you move from culture to culture and millennium to millennium.
I don't think they fail to see, they just choose not to see.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you, Ted, let's go back a little bit here, a few decades actually. There was a very famous person who's passed away recently, a few years ago, named Zecharia Sitchin.
Oh.
And Zecharia Sitchin wrote, of course, about the Anunnaki and about Samaria and all that stuff. What's your thoughts on Zecharia Sitchin?
Well, first of all, it's a case that Zecharia Sitchin, has a large number of disciples. People really like his work, etc. And I simply have to respect somebody who does the detailed research that he did. On the other hand, I cannot become a disciple. He has these rather weird theories about the mixture of DNA, for example, alien and terrestrial DNA, and he died in the period when the Human Genome Project was going on, and everybody was talking about DNA as being the essence of what makes a human being, and all of this kind of thing. So it appeared as though we really have some good science going here. But the Human Genome Project in the more recent decade has filled in a lot of gaps in our earlier knowledge about the simple evolution of human DNA and how it took place. There really isn't any room in there for a shot coming from outer space in order to tell the story of human development. So I tend not to agree with Sitchin and his disciples, and similarly with Rael and the Raelians on that particular story. Is it possible that Sitchin is right? Oh, I suppose it's plausible, but I really don't think that the evidence is in to give priority to Sitchin's explanation over those of your garden variety population geneticists.
I tend to agree 100%. In fact, my battle started with Sitchin a few years ago when I started researching the work of Michael Heiser. Are you familiar with his work?
I do not know his work, no.
He's a religious scholar. He took on Sitchin. There's a website called SitchinWasWrong.com or SitchinIsWrong.com. And he took him to task. I'm talking about he debunked him completely to the point that once you watch the documentaries this man put out, and you do your own research, which is the best part about the internet. You could go online and research it for yourself. Go to a library, do your own homework on this stuff. And once you do your own homework on the stuff that he's telling you to look at specifically, it's clear that Sitchin made up a lot. I mean, like you were saying earlier, I mean, he was just making stuff up left and right. If something didn't fit, he'll change it around and rearrange the meaning to fit what he wants.
I'll look this guy Heiser up then, yeah.
Oh, this guy was epic, Ted. Epic. Now, Ted, let me ask you, have you yourself ever interviewed any UFO witnesses or anybody claiming to be abducted?
Yes, I have. I served for a number of years as an investigator for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and I interviewed people claiming to have had UFO experiences of all different types, and that includes abduction experiences as well. And I did this primarily before the big change in the phenomenon in the late 1980s. I did have a chance to visit Charles Hickson, for example, in the Pascagoula, Mississippi case of 1973, and I've done some, but minimal interviewing of people who claim to be the hybrids. You were talking about David Jacobs and his work earlier in the program. I haven't duplicated the kind of work that Jacobs does, but I have, talked with people who claim to be hybrids.
I'm sorry, if you claim to be a hybrid, I want a DNA test.
Well,
I also want a drug test as well too. While you're at it, by the way.
Well, when I appreciated, frankly, the skeptical tone of your description of Jacob's work, because the hybrids that my wife and I have talked to, frankly, they look and behave just like us. I don't see anything unusual about them at all.
It's funny because a lot of the hybrids, hybridization, the crystal children, star children, all this new age stuff that's come around the block in the last 20 years, Ted. A lot of these folks that are claiming they're aliens, but they're sent here to be born here as humans, but they're really from another galaxy. I mean, this kind of stuff is ridiculous. It really is. It's mind-boggling that people come up with this kind of nonsense. But it's amazing how so many people fall for it and so many people are interested in this stuff, isn't it?
It is, and what I try to do is to figure out why it is, even if it's ridiculous, why it is that we want to believe this to be true. And I think there is a yearning that's been around for a couple of millennia to connect heaven and earth. And also, your and my egos are constructed in such a way we'd like to feel important, frankly. And if you and I are connected with heaven and everybody else comes around and asks us to enunciate aphorisms of great wisdom, of course, we're going to feel important. And so to be a UFO abductee is actually to be a celebrity of some sort. But I still want to press the question, why this form? And I suggested that from 1947 to 1987, that 40-year period, most people who were abducted reported experiences that were either benign or neutral on the one hand, or actually salvific on the other, that these extraterrestrials were coming from a more highly advanced scientific and technological civilization, and that they would bring us all the goodies that science and technology could bring, including world peace. And there was basically, to my judgment, a religious structure, a spiritual structure to the phenomenon, just disguised in the language of politics and science. What happens in the late 1980s, and this is where David Jacobs comes into the picture, is you get these negative reports of abductions, almost where an earthling is abused, sexually abused, and then out of that comes the hybridization framework, etc. And one of the things I have to do in this book, UFOs, God's Chariots, is try to figure out what's the connection. Why is there a change?
There's been like an evolution in the phenomenon.
I think the change might be that it's not the same aliens that people were dealing with. It might be one.
I'll take care of it.
or maybe they elected a different president from wherever they're from.
Or better story writers.
And their policy changed, and, you know.
That's right. Yes, maybe on Zeta 2 Reticuli, the Republicans did win the election.
Or on the other hand, you know, on this world, maybe the deal that we had with them at the time didn't work out, and once Reagan was out of office, things changed.
Well,
that's
actually,
a possibility.
My theory is a little bit more complex, and people such as David Jacobs and others don't like me for this, but I think it was due to a cultural change. Yeah. And if you've got time to hear the story, I'll tell you the story.
Oh, please, I agree. I agree already. Yeah, I agree already with the first part of that statement.
So what's in common? All right. It's hypnotic regression. Mm-hmm. So if we go back to the beginning of this story, we're going back to the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case of 1961-62. Right. And if you may remember that Benjamin Simon, who was the psychiatrist in Boston who retrieved Betty and Barney Hill's forgotten memories, used hypnotic regression in order to obtain that. Well, after that very, highly visible case, mm-hmm. UFO investigators started using hypnotic regression to retrieve data about abductions. And all through the 1970s, then you've got Leo Sprinkle and James Harder and others who are using hypnotic regression. And then something happens in 1980 that most ufologists simply ignore, and that is the publication of a book by a guy named Pazder called Michelle Remembers. And in this case, Pazder, the psychiatrist, uses hypnotic regression not to retrieve UFO data, but sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse. And this book gets widely read. By 1982, we begin a new phase in our culture, and that is the prosecution, you remember this, the prosecution of children's preschool and day school workers. You remember that? And by the time you get to the mid-1980s, over 100 cases in the U.S. Are accusing day school workers of sodomy, Satanism, child abuse, etc. And what is common is the use of hypnotic regression with the children to retrieve the accounts of abuse. The most expensive court case in Los Angeles County occurred during that time, and that was the McMartin preschool case from 1982 to 1987, in which the mother-daughter combo was accused of Satanism and sodomy, etc., and they were said, according to the children in hypnotic regression, that underneath the McMartin school was a cavernous basement where these rituals took place. Well, they dug down underneath, and of course there was no basement there, and so the McMartins were acquitted,
but still guilty in the public eye.
The jury said they could see that the counselors using counseling techniques, including hypnotic regression, were leading the children. So it's at this time that suddenly the UFO phenomenon changes. And in New York, we have Bud Hopkins, we have David Jacobs, and Whitley Strieber, and a little bit later John Mack, who start coming out with a whole bunch of books now in which UFO abductions look like the McMartin preschool. So it appears to me that there's simply a cultural carryover, and the common denominator in all of it are people who use hypnotic regression to retrieve data of forgotten memories.
That
That's
makes
Ted's
perfect
theory.
sense.
What do you think?
No, that makes perfect sense. It actually
it
goes
does.
along. It goes along with my other theory that about the evolution of the phenomenon itself, how it's carried over thanks to introduction of certain themes within movies and media and stuff like that. Like the Greys, for example. Why did they become the popular choice of what aliens look like? Well, that has a lot to do with the movies that depicted the Greys.
Right,
That's where people get that from, right?
Yes, I think so. I can't actually date that. I do distinguish between science fiction and the UFO phenomenon. I think there are only two genuinely UFO movies. That's The Day the Earth Stood Still of 1951, not the second one, and Close Encounters.
Nobody cares about the second one, by the way.
That's right. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977.
Yes.
And the second one is where we get the Greys, but the Greys were actually appearing in the 1970s in the media for non-blockbusters here and there. But I think that Spielberg finally nailed it down for us. After 1977, it's the Greys.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because it remained that way till now. It's still that way. And even a very famous abduction case, the 1970s case of Travis Walton, which in his book he goes into detail about how he saw a grayish looking aliens, but he also saw human-looking aliens. And that was completely omitted from the movie. They just wanted to show the gray-looking and mean aliens or doing all kinds of weird experiments on them. That's really where Hollywood has gone with this thing. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why so many people are having bad abduction cases supposedly put out there. They're having all these traumatic experiences. And I think a lot of that is led on by people who are doing hypnosis, just like you said. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It ties in perfectly.
You interviewed Travis Walton. Did he report to you whether he felt that the movie about him was accurate or inaccurate on this or related points?
Oh, my goodness. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
Ted, he was very, very animated about the fact that he completely hated the final cut of that movie.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, he loves the actors who are in it. He loves the writer, Tracy Torme. Did a fantastic job writing the original script. See, there's the thing that when he was first contacted to make that movie, there was a script that he was already outlining with Torme, and they came up with a concept to write the story the way it happened, or his details of the story anyway, and that's what they put on the script. For whatever reason, once the movie started in production, the studio said, well, you know what, we're going to take off the human-looking aliens. We don't want them. We're going to just go with the really mean aliens. And there's not going to be any of this stuff, that stuff, this over here. Just to remove all. Let's just make it really weird and creepy. In fact, even in the movie, if you watch the movie, the way he's dragged by the aliens in one of the scenes, that never happened. You can see him like searching around the ship, and there's like glasses floating and things floating around. None of that is real.
I think it's time for a reboot.
It is.
Yeah,
and he said that himself. He said that he's willing to do that.
I trust Tracy Torme. So, did you ask Torme? Did he feel like he was betrayed then by the final cut as well, or don't you know?
Completely. Like I said, he wants to recut that movie. And in fact, when I interviewed him, I said kind of jokingly, I was like, well, Travis, it's been so long. If you get those actors again, you're not going to be able to recut it properly because
you'd have to start over from scratch.
You'd have to start from scratch.
As I said before, I don't think that the other movies, even if they have flying saucers or aliens in them, are authentic to the phenomenon. I think you're kind of giving evidence of that because here you've got Travis Walton, who really belongs to the UFO phenomenon, and then you have a Hollywood interpretation that betrays it, because they want to sell movies, and so you don't really get a sense that UFO people, ufologists, don't think like science fiction people. They just don't. And to me, that's one of the nice things about ufology is that it is a distinct subculture, and the media partly gets it, but as in this case, it doesn't get it or doesn't want to get it.
Which I think that's what it is. I don't think it's that they don't want to get it. I think they just don't get it, period.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I don't think that there's so much they're not interested. I think they are interested. It's just they don't know what to do with the whole phenomenon.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, Ted,
they don't know how to make money out of it. That's what.
No, that's not true. They know how to make money off of it. Believe me. Where there's a will, there's a way, and there's a will to make money off of ufology. But here's the thing: when you look and you sit back and you look at the overall spectrum of ufology, and this has happened to me, Ted, for the last 5-6 years since I've been doing radio and talking about these subjects and interviewing folks like yourself and folks in the UFO community, or ufology community, I should say. One thing becomes very apparent: not everybody's honest. Not everybody's telling the truth. Not everybody is. Not everybody is on the level with not only the information, but with, let's just say, not everybody is clicking on all cylinders, if you know what I'm saying. That's a sad statement, but it's a very true statement. And I think that's one of the reasons why the mainstream media still kind of treats the subject kind of like like a goofy subject because of that fact, because they know of the giggle factor within ufology, the hoaxers, and we can go down the list of people who I think are hoaxers. There's a ton of them. But not only that, people that are mistaking things randomly because they just don't know any better. For example, during the 70s and 80s, for a long period of time, Ted, I'm sure you're familiar with this, many people reported UFO cases, or many UFO cases were reported, I should say. They were nothing more than misidentified objects. They were later discovered to be like the stealth bomber, our own government aircrafts.
Right.
And this is stuff that people were saying, oh, no, they're definitely aliens. And, I mean, how much of that stuff do you think MUFON got during the 60s and 70s and 80s? Tons. Tons of reports like that. Yeah, I mean, look, and I've had friends, Ted, who go skywatching, because that's what, I love skywatching. That's one of the reasons why we call the show Skywatchers Radio, because that, to me, it's a very important part of ufology. But I've had fellow skywatchers who tell me, yeah, man, I see UFOs all the time. Now, let's be honest. How many of us really go outside and see UFOs all the time, Ted? I mean, really?
Oh, yeah. I think
I mean, really?
The repeat reporters are, I agree. There's a good skepticism there, yeah.
And look, this is funny, and I have to bring this up. There's a ranch, and I'm not going to name the exact one, but there's a ranch, and you guys will know what I'm talking about because we talked about this recently on another show on Future Theater. And in this ranch, Ted, they have groups that come out to skywatch because supposedly the ranch, they could call on the aliens, and the aliens show up at their beck and call, right? The thing is, what people are seeing, and the person who I'm talking about kind of let it slip a little bit, what they're seeing are satellites. That's what they're viewing. That's another thing that people are mistaking for UFOs. Satellites. We have thousands of satellites in space.
Yeah, well, the UFO phenomenon is a big industry, and it's multi-layered, and there are a number of different vested interest groups. I don't mean that in a financial way, but in a kind of ideological way. I think the core, and perhaps this is my own selection, the core of, say, MUFON is made up of a group of people who have a scientific mindset. So they get a variety of reports. They want to investigate. They want to eliminate the IFOs, the identifiable flying objects, and get to that core that could be extraterrestrial. And some of them have PhDs in science, so their scientific approach is not at all unusual to them. But at the same time, there are lots of others who show up who have quite different agendas. I was at the UFO Congress in Scottsdale a couple months ago, and I met 2 or 3 reincarnation therapists and a couple shamans. And one shaman, a woman, very delightful woman, told me, well, she really likes these UFO meetings because there could be a wide variety of points of view, and nobody's ever critical of somebody else. And I thought, well, there's something kind of sweet about that. But it also tells you that the UFO phenomenon is sort of a bag of marbles, There's really quite a variety of things in there. And for my book, I tend to focus on this sort of core group, those who think of themselves as scientific, those who want to show on the basis of evidence that in fact Earth is being visited by extraterrestrials. And this is the group I find most interesting, and probably the group that my mind sort of dovetails with. Don't feel any need for reincarnation therapy, and but I do like the kind of UFO investigators. I do.
At the end of the day, do you think that the Earth is being visited on a regular basis? Do you think that's actually happening?
I am not convinced that that is in fact the case, and it's not that we lack evidence, it's that we have too much evidence, and the evidence is not internally coherent is the problem. And I sympathize with Stanton Friedman and others who want to say, look, there's really good evidence that we are being visited by extraterrestrials, but then you got all kinds of stuff that's part of the UFO phenomenon that doesn't fit. I saw a movie one time taken by a farmer out in the field. He just plowed it and planted and everything and was kind of being proud of himself. So he's just taking a film. And this classic circular flying saucer comes into the horizon. You think, oh, here we've got a spacecraft, and there are probably passengers in there from Zeta 2 Reticuli or something. Well, then suddenly this flying saucer starts to stretch out like bubble gum, and you get the thin thing in the middle, and then pop, and then suddenly you've got two flying saucers now, the same size as the first one, and they fly away in separate directions. Well, I want to say that doesn't look like a craft carrying passengers. It's something else. So here it is, and it's very much a part of the phenomenon, but it doesn't fit the extraterrestrial hypothesis model of craft visiting us. So I think there's a lot going on here, and even if I would hope the extraterrestrial hypothesis would be the case, boy, that just doesn't account for all the kind of data that we've got to deal with to explain.
No, I completely agree. A lot of the data, though, I mean, how much do you think is even really good data at this point with the way CGI and stuff? Because, I mean, really, any video that comes out is kind of like hokey at this point. I mean, can we take anything serious at this point with all the CGI stuff?
I've never seen a video in which I have a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Some of the early photos, like the Trent photos from Oregon, did pass all the tests. Even the Condon report stated that those were authentic. So there is some reliable data there. But no, you can't believe just everything that appears on YouTube. That's for sure.
No kidding. Now, how long have you been interested in the whole flying saucer phenomenon?
Well, unfortunately, I started as a kid. My mother and father were avid readers in the early days of the genre of UFO literature, and they actually went to hear UFO speakers such as George Adamski and others, and they would come home and talk, and I would read their books and stuff. So already in the 7th grade,
wow,
I was the local neighborhood expert on flying saucers. I never gave it up.
Have you become more skeptical over the years since you've been doing all this research?
Yes,
definitely you have, right?
For the reason I gave you is that there is just so much going on.
Yep.
And you can't put it all together into a single package. And we have not, despite, 60 plus years, you can't really point to something and say, you know what, this answers the question definitively. It's not there.
Yeah, no kidding. Area 51 was officially declared to be a real facility by the government recently. They officially announced it exists. Of course, we've known it exists since, forever now. Do you think there's anything going on in there extraterrestrial, or do you think it's just all smoke screens and smoke and mirrors?
It's gone by now. Whatever was there, I think they moved.
I like the story that you told earlier about the tourists, my wife and I have gone right up to the no trespassing sign, and we looked over, and it was all very exciting. There's no question that Area 51 has been around since perhaps 1955,
Right.
As a test site for weapons, U-2 among other weapons. So the existence and the history of Area 51 in itself doesn't tell us anything about UFOs. So if there was a crashed UFO, would it have gone to Area 51? More than likely,
Perhaps, yeah.
it would have gone to Area 51. Now,
Yep.
There's a museum in Las Vegas, which I've not visited yet, and but I plan on it. It's the history of atomic weapons, and there's an Area 51 exhibit. So it's going to become part of our public knowledge, I think, in the next months.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna have to check that. I never heard of that place in Vegas. Museum.
It's actually, I think, a branch of the Smithsonian.
Oh, nice. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have more
Smithsonian
details.
doesn't hide any. By the way, I got to admit, or got to comment, but the Smithsonian has never been known to hide actual facts about history. Is that correct?
I have no way of confirming or disconfirming that.
I have no clue, Alan. None.
Sorry, I was reading.
That's
an
a
article.
Google question. If anybody knows, please Google it up and let us know. Call in.
I was reading an
I have no
article this past week about the Smithsonian possibly covering up ancient Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon that had some serious legitimacy to it. And I'm just wondering if anybody has ever heard about that or commented on it or know anything about it.
Nope.
Not
No
with
idea.
me, sorry.
No idea. Ted, going back into religious aspects here with ufology, and we're going to hit a break in a few minutes, by the way, but I wanted to ask you real quick. You know, the Vatican has, I think it was last I heard it was maybe 5 miles worth of data records sealed in their vaults, you know, it's stuff that nobody's ever seen. Do you think there's stuff in there that deals at all with the alien phenomenon, or because I am a believer that we have been visited in the past at some point. Don't believe all the ancient astronaut stuff. I think a lot of that is bogus, and I don't believe it's accurate ascension. But I do think there's a case for maybe we've been visited at some point. Do you think there's anything the Vatican might know? Because recently the Vatican, not long ago, did say that, you know, aliens are part of God's plan, and they're coming really close to saying that aliens are real.
Well, I know some things about the Vatican, but not everything. I worked from 1987 to 2002 during the pontificate of John Paul II with the Vatican Observatory, and John Paul II was very interested in the interaction between science and faith, and so I had a chance to meet him on a few occasions. Oh, wow. And the Vatican Observatory has been around since a few generations after Galileo. I mean, after all, they got to take Galileo's telescope and search the skies. Yep. And since the Second World War, the Vatican Observatory is engaged in a considerable amount of serious scientific research on galaxy formation and related projects, and the topic of extraterrestrial intelligence is an everyday conversation. I mean, it's just normal. The Pope Francis I, about 3 weeks ago, gave a homily within the Vatican in which he used as an illustration, what if a flying saucer were to land and a Martian gets out and asked to be baptized, would we baptize the Martian? Well, Francis I, who has a PhD in chemistry, by the way, likes science, but this was part of his sense of humor because he's been working since his pontificate began to expand the horizon of Catholic believers. And about a year ago, he said, should atheists who have high-minded morality become partners with Catholics in making the world a better place? Yes, indeed. So I think of what he said about aliens or Martians fits that. Be that as it may, if you want to have a good conversation about this, talk with one of those Jesuits who's an astronomer for the Vatican Observatory. They've got a lot to say, and I don't know what they would say then about documents that are locked up and sealed and hidden. I'll bet you even Francis I has not read them.
Probably not. And that's crazy. 5 miles worth of documents.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you real quick because this is something that's come up, a lot. Not really so much on this show, but other shows that I've done, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Do you really think, and honestly, in your heart of hearts, do you think that NASA and SETI and scientists like that take the UFO phenomenon at all serious?
Well, before I answer that, let me thank you for using the word perfect so frequently. My wife Karen is listening to the show, and it wouldn't hurt for her to hear that. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't have to conjecture. I know a fair number of research scientists at both NASA and SETI. And apart from a few individuals here and there, by and large, it's clear they do not take the UFO phenomenon seriously at all. They tend even to shun people who are involved with ufology. And one of my concerns has been I don't think that's necessary because, as I mentioned, there are a number of people in MUFON and other UFO investigators who think of themselves really as being quite scientific, but your SETI and your NASA people think of themselves as having a patent on science. So in the summer when they have their barbecues, the NASA and SETI people, they have their barbecue, and the UFO people, they have their barbecue, but they don't invite each other. And I just think that's where we are, and I do think that in the future, maybe they should invite each other, and I'd like to go to both.
How much of that do you think is by design because they just want to not associate themselves with the UFO community? Or how much of that do you think is by the UFO community not wanting to involve themselves with NASA, so a lot of the hoaxers are not found out to be hoaxers, and maybe they're deliberately
it is
staying
the
away.
case that a number of the scientists in SETI and NASA are aware of hoaxes and just plain hokiness and craziness, and they just don't want to be associated with it. And it's also the case, believe it or not, that a lot of funders want to think of themselves as being very serious about science. And so the greater the distance between NASA and SETI from the UFO phenomenon, actually, the better it is for funding. But I don't want to reduce it to that. There is some humor, and Stan Friedman usually is able to formulate this. He'll say, those SETI and NASA scientists think that every planet in the Milky Way is inhabited by intelligent creatures, but they're not visiting here. And, that's a great rhetorical device, but there is a little bit of nuts de cuckoo stuff going on, but I'm concerned about method, about assessment of evidence, about trying to get clear on what we know versus what we don't know. And there is a scientific, an authentic scientific mindset within the UFO phenomenon that should be just very much at home with SETI people and NASA people who are committed to the same principles for gaining knowledge.
Huh. I'm dumbfounded by SETI over the years, by the fact that they've spent so much money researching the skies and they still not hit on any signal at all. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Well, NASA just made a statement the other day. Angel, I don't know if you saw the link that I sent you, but NASA made a statement clear as day the other day saying that they expect to find intelligent life within the next 20 years.
That's interesting.
Did you see the link that I sent you earlier?
No, I didn't have a chance. I was dealing with your technical issues, Alan. Sorry about that.
Okay, fine. Rub it in.
Yeah. Ted, have you researched or heard about that?
There is no way that an estimate like that can make any empirical sense. I mean, and I'm not critical of SETI. I love SETI, and I love the scientists.
No, this was NASA itself.
Oh, this was NASA. Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
And you want to know something? I'm skeptical as well, unless they already have the answer and they're going to wait that
Yes.
to tell us.
No, that's not the case. At least not with SETI. SETI actually has a plan of information dissemination all in place should the big day come
right.
when they get contact. I don't really know what NASA thinks about this, but right now, all we have, by that I mean we, is NASA and SETI, are big numbers. I mean, lots of stars, lots of planets, some of which are in the habitable zone. There is zero empirical evidence for even microbial life in our solar system, let alone intelligent life elsewhere in the Milky Way. So the movement from no knowledge to knowledge simply cannot be predicted, even though everyone is excited, rightly excited, that our knowledge about exoplanets is increasing almost daily. I'm excited about it.
It is exciting, but it's exciting to hear them talk about it. But again, they never. I mean, look, whether it's 20 years or 100 years, I hope I'm alive to be able to see them actually say they found something. But I think the first thing they're going to acknowledge is just microbial life of that. And Alan, I don't think that's too far away because I think there's probably already evidence on Mars of microbial.
Well, actually, you're right about the Mars thing because there's a discrepancy in the Mars research. That I was looking into actually the other week. It turns out that there are two discrepancies. With the soil samples that were taken on Mars when the rover landed, scientists had said that there needs to be at least 300 parts per million of organic matter or bacterial matter to say there's life on Mars. The whole funny part is that they didn't find it. When they did the soil samples, there was at least 30 parts per million where they took the sample, not 300 parts per million, and that's only one sample that they took, and they haven't disclosed any other samples.
Right. Then there's always that. How long will they hold? Like you said, I mean, they might already know. How long will they hold that evidence?
Eventually, yeah. I don't know. How well do we trust them?
That's the big question. How well do we trust them? You know, NASA's acronym, NASA, for a long time, the running joke has been that it stands for Never a Straight Answer. And it's really become, more than just a joke. It really is that. I mean, you never get a straight answer from these folks. It's always, well, maybe this, maybe that. But, I hope I'm alive, Ted, to see them, finally come out and say, you know what?
Well,
darn it, we found aliens or we found microbial life. I'm dying for that.
I'm with you on that one. And if you read the science journals, which I do quite regularly, one of the jokes is the discovery of water on Mars because every couple months they announce they finally discovered water on Mars. Well, they haven't, actually. The theory is there was once water on Mars.
Right.
But
there's ice at the polar caps. Is that not water? There's ice at the polar caps of Mars. Are you telling me that's not water?
Well,
Ted?
Well, that's not even a pun, is it? As far as I know, they haven't actually dug into the ice. So, there is another theory as yet unexplored that there's water subsurface, and what they want to do is drill down deep enough in order to find that water. And if they do find water, could it be filled with microbial life? So, for your Mars experts, it seems to be like tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that.
The day after tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's funny though because Alan makes a good point though. There is, there is ice on the polar caps of Mars. It's scattered. It's not all over the place, but there have been images that show ice formations on the polar caps. Now,
and they recede and expand actually depending on the seasons.
Right. But here's the thing: how much how frustrating is it for everybody like us who are into these subjects to see them constantly land in places that are completely far away from the polar caps, where maybe there they could find the water. Why are they going in parts of Mars where they know there's nothing but desert?
Now that's an excellent question. You're a taxpayer. If I were you, I would,
I'm mad about that.
And tell them to land on a polar cap. That's a good idea.
I mean, that would answer the question. Is there ice? Is there water? Well, let's land where there might be some, because the pictures are saying there's ice there during the seasons. Well, let's go there and find out. Makes sense, right? Now, Ted, I don't know how much of Mars you've seen over the years of leaked images and stuff like that, but there's even areas of Mars that showed like vegetation on some images. Have you seen any of that stuff?
Oh yeah, that's Skip's site, right?
That's one of them. Yeah.
MarsAnomalies.com.
I have not. Mm-hmm. I have a colleague at NASA with whom I'm in continuing conversation. His name is Chris McKay, and he's a Mars expert. And whenever I need a little Mars fix, I say, "Hey, Chris, what's up?" Let me just say, those kinds of conversations I never hear. So my suspicion is that. We probably still have yet to find concrete evidence for the first time of microbial life on Mars. I don't think it's in, and I have never heard a credible scientist say that vegetation already exists there.
No scientist will touch it. I mean, these are images that will leak on but again, it's the internet, so how much of it is credible?
Oh, right.
Yeah, it is what it is. But, there's stuff that we have to look at anyway and dissect it. And I've seen some images, like the glass tunnels or the glass tubes on Mars. That's very interesting stuff. And that's been officially put out there by NASA. That's not like something that somebody just put out there.
There are plans more in the private sector than by NASA to colonize Mars, and do have designs for what the first colonies will look like. And there's a NASA-sponsored laboratory in the desert of Arizona called Biosphere, in which the bubble that would be transferred first to the moon and then secondly to Mars is there. It's an ecologically internally complete life ecology there to support.
It's a full ecosystem.
And so those that kind of research is just continuing. And yes, once we land on the moon and land on Mars, we'll drop down our bubble, our biosphere, and the human beings will live inside there until they can emigrate out.
Now, the Mars One mission, of course, I don't know if you're familiar with. I don't know if that's where you're going with, but the Mars One mission, they had 200,000 people sign up for this thing at one point.
Oh yes, for a one-way trip.
How crazy is that, Ted?
If only I could get my mother-in-law to sign up.
We all wish that, Ted.
That's just so wrong. It's funny.
Mother-in-laws.
No, but I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, look, we were talking about earlier about how the media in movies and stuff has made this stuff mainstream.
I think we need to ask again about human nature, because even though I don't know the Mars One people, I do know the Mars Society people, and they have a strong sense of manifest destiny. In fact, they even use that term, and they even use the term Promethean. So they want to define human nature as being driven by a force to explore and go new places. And just as Europe wanted to expand to the new world, so also does the human race want to expand to the other planets. And so the Mars Society collects this kind of enthusiastic, exploratory people. So there's an issue of the human spirit here, and I think we all recognize it. It's usually you don't find a whole room full of people believing in manifest destiny, but the Mars Society gets them all together in the hundreds.
It's amazing,
So I can understand why you would have that many people sign up. I genuinely do. I don't want to make that trip, but I can understand why others would. Yeah.
I mean, it's a one-way trip, but let's just say it's a one-way trip, but you're not even guaranteed that you're going to make it to Mars because you never know what could happen from here to Mars. I mean, we've never traveled that far in space.
One of the
with people.
Interesting phenomenon. Let's get back to human nature. In the biosphere experiments, they've actually tried to put human beings in the biosphere and keep them there for a year because it's going to take, a year by the time they leave Earth and they get established on Mars.
Right.
And you know what? They couldn't last more than 6 months. They were going to kill each other. They had to pull them out.
Yeah.
You can't coop 6 people in the case of the Biosphere 2 experiment.
Are you kidding me? I mean,
human beings, and they were going to kill each other. They demanded to get out of there. And so there's something about human nature that we are really risking a lot by putting, 2, 4, 6 people on a spaceship.
Yeah.
Nobody will be alive when they get there.
You would expect that science or these people would have learned from like the Real World, the TV show.
Yeah.
Don't put people in a group. Big Brother, the TV show. Don't put people in a group and expect them to get along because it's just we're humans. We find flaws in each other and we argue. That's what we do.
Oh, yeah, nitpick and gossip. I talked to a husband and wife who were members of this team. The 6 in Biosphere 2, and after 6 months they had to be yanked out. And it wasn't that they didn't love each other or anything like that. You just can't stand living together like that.
Who would want to go anyway on a trip like this with your wife and be there for the rest of your lives? What if it doesn't work out and you do break up and now you're
even if
stuck on Mars together?
Girlfriend, it would only last a week, right?
Right. I mean, that can't be good. And could we even make that kind of travel? The human body, could it really travel from here to Mars and be okay? I mean, I don't know if we can survive that space travel.
Okay. I think we have to accept the fact that with the change in gravity, that the human body will change, and if we don't come back, it's going to change permanently, not only for the generation that makes the trip, but for any future generations that are born there, and our bodies will not look on Mars like they look here because gravity is a factor in why we look the way we do.
Yeah, no kidding. I guess I don't know if they'll get smaller or taller on Mars because gravity is less there. So
I
taller,
think
right?
we'd get taller. Carl Sagan once speculated, and it stuck in my imagination, that if you were to have intelligent creatures on a planet with a high level of gravity, they'd look like turtles. Whoa,
wow.
That makes sense, right?
Well, why don't we have turtles on this planet? I mean,
yeah, what are they doing?
What are they doing here?
Yeah.
That's what's beautiful about this planet. We have such a diverse amount of animals and creatures, and it just makes no sense what we're
I
doing
think
here.
those turtles are actually aliens from Jupiter.
Hey, listen, Michael.
Those Ninja Turtles. I'm telling
Michael Bay got into a lot of trouble for saying that the turtles were from space. So let's not go there because people were angry, Ted. People were mad, and Michael Bay almost lost everything because of one mistake.
Right.
Now, let me ask you: do you think that NASA, or well, not even NASA, but do you think, or do you talk about the ETI myth at all, and how the scientists believe in that myth, or do scientists believe in the ETI myth? Do you think?
Yes, I do, and my science friends don't like me to talk this way, so maybe one of them will call me up and say some nasty things. But a myth is first of all a framework through which we interpret data,
right?
And then secondly, it can also be a story of origin, and that's what we have in the case of SETI. And the myth looks like this. That there is such a thing as cosmic evolution. Now, Charles Darwin gave us a theory of biological evolution, which did not include the origin of life. It only included how you change from one species to another, hence the book was called Origin of Species. It was not called Origin of Life. But so non-scientifically you can say, well, non-life evolves into life. Okay, I just want to say no empirical evidence for that whatsoever. However, it's part of the ETI myth. So on another planet now, abiotic chemistry evolves into life, and then it gets more and more complicated over time, and over time we get to intelligence, and from intelligence we get to stupid people who believe in religion, and then
and then we're here.
We evolve further, then we get to smart people who believe in science and technology, and here's the tip-off about the myth, is it's commonly said amongst both SETI and ufology people that if a civilization has evolved longer than it does here on Earth, it is more advanced, it has progressed more, and ergo its science and technology is more advanced than ours, and ergo it has solved many of the problems we are unable to solve. Ergo, if they contact us, they will drop from the sky blessings on top of blessings from their science and technology. And who on earth better than anybody else to make this contact than the most highly evolved, most highly progressed people on earth, namely the scientists in their white coats? And so it's a very self-serving myth, and it goes way beyond scientific evidence. Our most renowned evolutionary biologists, I'm thinking here of Francisco Ayala, Ernst Mayr, Stephen Jay Gould, all agree there is no such thing as progress in evolution. There is no guarantee that no matter how many million years you have evolution going on, that it's going to move towards intelligence, let alone such things as science and technology. And so the ETI myth does not even have the best of our evolutionary biologists giving it support. Yet, this is the myth that justifies the very research that SETI is able to pursue. And last October, I had a chance to talk with SETI. There were about 90 scientists in the room, and I started talking about the assumptions of their research in mythical terms. And oh my goodness, a number of them really took umbrage because they see themselves as scientists and not mythological. And one guy with a big smirk on his face said, well, we have to tell myths. That's the way we get our funding.
Wow.
You know, and I have a funny story that correlates to that, by the way, Ted. When I first got started with the whole ufology thing, and I started doing a radio program 5 years ago, I had a person, I don't want to name this name because I don't want to put them on there like that because they're actually real nice. But there was a lady who told me, you know, what do you want to do in ufology? What are your aspirations, in this radio stuff? And I said, not debunk, but, to get to the bottom of things and maybe learn the truth and, talk to individuals who have experienced stuff. And she was like, well, that's great and dandy, but you're not ever going to make a name for yourself unless you do something beyond the normal. And I'm like, well, short of being abducted, there's really nothing else I could do. Right. I could go to the field with signs and see if somebody comes and takes me, but it's probably not going to happen. But she goes, no, what you need to do is you need to come up with a good storyline, and just sell it, write a couple books, put it out there, do the tours, do the lectures, go around, develop your story over years and make a name for yourself, and this is the way you get into ufology. And I said to myself, so in other words, I got to create a myth, create a story, sell books, and the same thing SETI does. They have to create a myth, sell a fantasy to get their funding. And that's what a lot of people in ufology do. They create a myth, create a fantasy to sell their books so they can make a living. And one correlation I've seen, Ted, I don't know if you've seen this yourself, but especially in ufology, and I can name a couple of names, but I don't want to do that. But there's a lot of folks in ufology that are failed musicians. Have you noticed this? Where they failed in music, they jump into ufology for whatever reason.
Right.
They start to hit it off with the people who believe their stuff. Some of them are claiming to be Edgar Casey, for example, in a past life. Who am I talking about here? And they create such a big buzz. Next thing you know, they're telling the world, oh, by the way, we're musicians. Yeah, we sucked at it and we made no money, so now we're here. Listen to our records, and they start promoting their records like like they're the next Beatles, for example. And then people who already are believers in their nonsense or are following them are now looking at their music and they're like, well, this is really catchy. It must be good because he's promoted it and we like him. And that's another avenue I think that people are using ufology for, to kind of give themselves a name so they can then sell their other products, which would be a lot of them is music, which is ironic.
Well, I'm going to write a UFO song now. You've inspired me.
That's just so wrong.
Actually, I'd like to offer two comments about that. And I think the first one is, I don't think there's a lot of money in ufology. As I mentioned, I had interviewed Charles Hickson of the Pascagoula, Mississippi event, and there was a period in which Hickson and Parker were worldwide no household names. Everybody knew of Hickson and Parker and blah blah blah. And a ghostwriter helped Charlie Hickson write a book, and I was in communication with Charlie Hickson for a number of years. He was really disappointed that he didn't make any money. He thought there was gold there, but you know what? There wasn't any gold there.
Well, how long ago was this, though, Ted?
Oh, well, this would be, say, for the incident was 73, so he was probably trying to milk it for profit in the early 1980s, maybe.
There was no money in that period. Now, there's tons of money.
Maybe there is. But the second thing is that I want to say, with regard to SETI scientists and to a lesser extent NASA scientists, I genuinely think they do good science. So if I suggest that there are some mythical dimensions to the set of assumptions with which they take to their research, I don't want to say that their science is faulty because of it. I just want to say they probably think more highly of themselves than they should. But I'm still glad that, as the years go by, they give us more and more valuable data about what's going on in the universe. And even if they never make contact with an intelligent civilization, they will help us know more about the universe. So I don't want to say that just because there are some mythological components that the science is bad, but I do want to say the public ought not to believe everything the scientist says. That's all.
Well, a lot of the SETI stuff is kind of bad because they're still looking in spectrums that we use. Like aliens are going to use radio signals, right? I mean, aliens are evolved supposedly. If they're much more evolved, they're not using the same kind of stuff that we use. It's just not happening.
Yeah, some of the critics make that point. I think in defense of SETI, you might say, well, what else are we going to do?
Listen, unfortunately, we're almost out of...
SETI.
No, go ahead.
And listening for radio signals is as good as any option,
Well, yeah, if you want to hear a good broadcast like this one.
Well, I would honestly think if Roswell, if we did retrieve the crash ship from Roswell, we would have been able to figure out what type of way they have communicating through the stars.
Not necessarily. We might not even know how that thing works still today. Alien technology is alien technology, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, though, we're all out of time, Ted, and we have to say goodnight for the evening. I want to give you a chance to tell everybody how to get to you, give them your link. I know they can find the book, UFOs, God's Chariots, on Amazon. Please, everybody, get this book. It's a really, really good read. Highly recommended. It's by New Page, and it's a great, great book. But tell everybody your website address, Ted, so everybody can go follow you.
UFOs, God's Chariots is the book. My website is tedstimelytake.com, and you can buy the book on the website or go directly to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or what have you. But my larger field of interest is the relationship between science and religion, and so if you go to tedstimelytake.com, well, you'll see lots of other goodies there as well. So it's been great talking to you guys.
Ted, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for being here with us, Ted, and taking part on the show. Sorry we couldn't get any calls for you, which is weird on Dark Matter Radio. I don't understand what's going on with Dark Matter Radio people. So many people listening, they just sit back and listen. They don't Participate.
Nobody wants to talk to you.
I think it's my overpowering voice, Alan. Anyway, guys, we're going to be back next week with Jeff Willis on the show, so please come back and see us, or listen to us, I should say, next week on Skywatchers Radio. Real quick, I want to give a very special shout-out to Raven Xeon and the Zodiac Sun. This is a band whose music we play a lot on the show. In fact, we're going to start playing it now as we go off air. And check out their website. Really, really cool music. Every song these guys put on is always top-notch stuff. Check out their website over on, and I'm going to get you the exact link here, and he sent it to me, and I should have it prepared, but I don't, as usual. Facebook.com/The Zodiac Sun. Check them out, and you can find their stuff on skywatchersradio.com also. For our colleague Keith Rowland, for Alan, the co-host here. But guys, come back next week here on Dark Matter Radio Network, and keep listening. There's more stuff on the way.